I'm going to demonstrate two different ways of shading using a HB pencil. So a HB pencil is the kind of pencil that you can use for writing. It's not particularly soft nor particularly hard, and it's not a specialist art pencil, but it can definitely be used to do some shading. So I have two line drawings of circles here on my page. I'm going to treat these as if they are spheres and pretend that there is a light source coming from this direction. Now the first way of shading is just what I would call sort of like rough, sketchy shading. I'm just going to sketch in with my graphite pencil all the area of my sphere that I want to have any shadow on. So even a light amount of shadow. I'm not being too concerned about my marks, I'm just kind of going back and forth. Going around the edge of the circle, and then I'm going to come up to the top where the light is coming from. I'm going to leave a patch with no pencil on because that's going to be my highlight. So this is going to be my highlight here, and what I have on the rest of my circle is a kind of grey, rough shaded area. But there's no gradation in that, there's no change between a light grey to a dark grey, it's just all one sort of grey. Now with a HB, because it isn't a soft pencil, it's not really used for shading in the way that you would use maybe a 9B or a 5B, where you might press harder and get quite a black, very, very dark grey graphite. With this you can press harder and get it slightly darker, but not much. So instead, to get a darker area, what I'm going to do is layer. So I'm going back over the areas that I've already done my scribbles on, and I'm layering up. But I'm not going to go all the way to the edge of my highlight area because I want to leave some bits just with one layer of pencil so that they stay the lightest grey. As I get towards this area here, which would be the darkest area of my sphere because no light would reach it, I'm going to have more layers. So this darker area might end up with 6 or 7 layers of graphite on it, whereas this area here only has 1 layer. And because I want a gradual shift between dark and light, every now and then I'll come up a bit, put a few lines going up into this mid area here. I'm not really varying how hard I'm pressing with the pencil, it's always just the same. Just building up layers of graphite. So you'll notice that this side there's hardly any paper peeking through, but here you've got quite a few white gaps where the paper's showing. So now I have a rough three-dimensional form, darker at this end and lighter over here. So the next method I'm going to show you is quite similar in terms of building up your shading, however you apply your marks in quite a different way. So on this one I was going to back and forth, slightly zigzaggy, straight lines, and then this technique I'm going round and round in spirals. So again I'm going to shade in all the area that I want to be grey, right up to the edge of my highlight. Not pressing very hard with the pencil because I want to be able to keep it quite fluid motion. Along the edge I find it easier to use slightly smaller circles, just so I've got a bit more control about where I'm putting the pencil. So now I've kind of covered all of the shaded area in one grey, right up to the edge of my highlight. And I'm going to do similar to what I did before. I'm going to go back over some areas so that they end up with a layer of more graphite on. But always I'm maintaining this circular motion, and what that does is it slightly disguises the movement of my hand, and makes the marks not invisible but harder to see, giving you a more diffuse and soft effect with your shading. That becomes more apparent the more you add the shading. So you do need a bit more patience with this method, as it does take quite a bit longer than the sketchy method. So I'm kind of working back and forth down to this line where I want it to be quite dark. Every now and then I'm going up a little bit because I want it to be a gradual shading. I don't want it to suddenly go from grey to darker grey. I want it to very gradually change. So you can see that this method takes quite a bit longer, but the effect is much smoother. It really depends on what kind of texture you'd like to achieve, but that's two methods of shading just using a normal HB pencil that you can achieve.